There are so many horrible situations you can find yourself in the college recruiting process. Some people chalk them up to not knowing or a mistake, and others chalk them up to bad luck. However, regardless, the situation my client Marcia and her son were in has to be the worst situation I've seen in the last 2 to 3 years. When Marcia and her son decided to enroll with myself and my team, they had 3 things going on that were detrimental to their recruiting process. Number 1, her son had no game film. It was all from practice because he was at a bad fit program where he wasn't being treated fairly and he was not getting the playing time that he deserved. So we didn't have any game footage to work with to showcase his skills to college coaches. Everything was from practice. Number 2, he didn't have a good recommendation from his coaching staff because there wasn't going to be a good relationship when he left. So we weren't going to be able to use them as a reference when he was transferring to another program. And number 3, to top it all off, he decided he wanted to transfer in mid-November and wanted to be in another program and committed by December 20th. That means we had roughly 30 days to take this athlete from nothing going on, transferring, committing, getting through all the paperwork, getting through admissions, and enrolling in another program. Just to give you clarity, it typically takes 14 to 20 days to get through that last process of getting your financial aid back, enrolling, going through the process with the coaches, getting an offer, and getting enrolled in your classes. And we had to do everything from entry level, starting to talk to the coach, down to enrolling in classes in less than 30 days. With that being said, what you're about to watch is Marcia explaining how the process unfolded from the moment they decided to enroll in Apex, even before that, down to the moment to where her son decided to commit to the college he was going to play the rest of his college football career. Without further ado, let's jump into the video. This was with Apex, how things went with Coltrane's recruiting and overall what you were expecting versus the outcome, okay? So the first question I have for you is before Apex, before you guys started working with us, what were the things like for you and Coltrane when you came to us early November, knowing that, you know, we were on a tight schedule and he needed to find a new program by January? What was kind of the situation going on at Wheeling and overall, give me the vibe that was going on for you guys?
The situation at Wheeling had gotten to the point where he wanted to leave, and I was opposed to it at first, but after conversations with Coltrane, I decided that that wasn't we decided that that wasn't the correct environment for him. Now, going to another environment, it was chaotic. We didn't know what to do. He had film, it was all over the place in several platforms. I didn't have connections about coaches, colleges, didn't know how to market him. So those were kind of the big, how do you get him noticed, especially since he's a transfer. I had heard horror stories about the portal. Everybody and their mother has an opinion. So when you're listening to all of that, you just don't know. So I needed an expert to help us through that particular process. So that's how it was.
Gotcha. Yeah, I remember when you first started talking to us, it was a very interesting and unique situation. He hadn't really played. He hadn't gotten much film. The best we had was practice footage. But once we started, what kind of changed first that made this feel different than what you were currently doing? And also, I guess would be the right
so
thing.
What felt right was, after so Nikolai had our initial call, and then when you jumped in, you were like, and one of the things that because we would look at several recruiting, people, which people should do. What you serviced, you had options for our need. Our need was full service. We needed the marketing. We needed you to handle the emails. We needed you to have the background knowledge about football. We needed you to have the background knowledge about the NCAA rules and what he needed to do. You had a program that was fully automated, yet had injects for critical human intervention, like talking to him about, what the coaches are saying, responding to them, what to say. He needed all of that. So I recognized that I wasn't going to be doing it, and I know that he wasn't going to be doing it. And if we wanted to get him transferred, we needed someone that was going to be that had something in place that could handle our requirements. And he definitely was very he needed attention to be able to help through that process. And as we moved along, you were very responsive, right? there wasn't a time where he needed something that, there were times where I didn't even know that you all were communicating at all. You just handled it. You and your team just handled it all. And I was, just like amazed. And when you set the timeline, you said this is a timeline that we're going to work towards, being that we want to get him in a new school by, the end of December, because we were looking at November. So but before Christmas, we wanted to make our decision. And so you set a timeline, and your team had everything set up. They were on Twitter, they were on Instagram. You had everything, like everything was done and ready to go. And then you kept track of how many coaches you were, how many schools you were reaching out to, as well as how many responses he was getting, what responses were coming from what coaches, who were those particular schools that were recruiting him the most, so that we can make that chart that you came up. All of that's like very important, and you need to be able to make a decision. So it came into full scope, once we got started. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. It was definitely a quick. I know we were working on a tight schedule, so we tried to.
It was very tight. But your team had those things. You all were kicking them out, Twitter and sending the emails and keeping track of who said what. I don't know how you did it, but it helped us to be able to make there were a lot of coaches. We had a lot of schools. At one point, I think we had 26 or 27 schools. And then you knew what schools contacted him when, how, who he was talking to. Amazing. I had no knowledge. So
Thank you. That's one of the things we strive for. I don't want you to have to put in too much work. So
I didn't put any work in, other than convincing him, looking at, after we had narrowed down where we thought, just logically making that decision, right? But sometimes some decisions can't be made off of logic, they have to be made off of feel, and I understand that too. But for a transfer student, the thing that's important is, what are his requirements? And we were able to go through that process, meeting all of our requirements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I love that response, by the way. I had like 3 questions in a row that you answered all at once, and that was perfect. I really appreciate the compliments, by the way. It really means a lot to me and my team, and I'll make sure to let Nikolai know, because he always loves hearing that. How, for someone who isn't inside of Apex, could you explain exactly what it looks like from the day you start signing up with us, we get everything set up to where the outreach is actually going? Because obviously there's a little delay between the day you sign up to us getting all the film and everything prepared to actually reaching out to coaches. Within that first 2 weeks to then the next 2 months after that, what does that feel like for you guys as a family coming into this? Obviously, it starts a little slow and it ramps up really fast. What does that look like from your perspective?
So once it ramped, once you got his, you set a timeline. So I think that's the biggest and the key thing. So we knew when things were going to be, start hitting. Most looking at it from the outside, I just know that Coltrane was like, this school hit me up. This school hit me up. This school hit me. So as a parent, I'm looking at it as a further step away from the entire process, because it's you and your team and him, the athlete, that are really handling who are they communicating with on Twitter, right? Who are they seeing in their emails? And so all I would hear about was the various different schools that were hitting him up, right? He had interest in. So all I would do was go and look at the school, of course, look at look at statistics. He's football, so I would start looking at trying to check it out. What was important, one of the things that was important to me was, kind of distance. You need to know your kids. So if distance is a factor, it isn't a factor, you have to make that decision. So again, hitting those requirements, and hearing about, him getting responses from the outreach that was being done. That's what it looked like to me. So I knew about all of these different schools. And so I began that, spreadsheet. Then you got on and you were like, here, let me share one with you. And then you began putting in, all of the different schools. And in our conversations, you heard us talk about some of those different requirements. So we began tracking those things, right? And so as the process kind of wound down, we needed to decide, because he had to get accepted. Let me back up. There were certain things that he had to do: send transcripts, send FAFSAs. That tracking sheet helped us to be able to do that for all of those universities. So I knew what I needed to do as a parent, and he knew what he needed to do as an athlete. Can't name what those things were, but he was talking obviously talking to the coaches, keeping the conversation going, seeing where their head was about him and why they were recruiting him, while I was getting the FAFSAs and getting the official transcripts sent, and keeping track of dollars, if because there are certain things that they aren't going to send unless they have certain things like the unofficial transcript and the FAFSA before they send an offer. So that sheet that you developed really, really helped us to be able to keep track of where we were in that entire process, because there were so many schools.
Absolutely. I remember at one point you said, like, can we just stop and commit? I think it was on one of those calls we had with you, me and Coltrane, when we just started crossing people off that list.
It was just a lot of schools. Like we need to narrow this thing down. You can have 100 schools. Like, okay, it's nice that all of these schools are showing interest, but realistically, what are the top ones that we're really, really looking at? And so again, the timeline helped to kind of determine that, like, we needed to cross these off because of what reason, but they are JUCO, or they NAIA, or they were in Oregon. He's not going, again, dependent on the athlete and the family's requirements, they have to make those decisions. And we knew our requirements, and we were able to make those decisions that were best for Coltrane.
Right. Absolutely. Just two more questions for you. Number one, what do you think would have happened without this level of support, or how do you think it would have been different potentially if you went with somebody else instead of going with, me and my team?
It would have been very frustrating, because other organizations that we had looked at didn't provide the full service support that we needed. It was, well, we'll teach you how to edit. I wasn't editing anything, okay? And Coltrane wasn't editing anything. You would have been looking at Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck on, the videos. No, I didn't have time for that, right? And to showcase and highlight and put it in, and to organize it on the YouTube page, I didn't have time for that. So if a parent has time for that, I mean, you have an option for that. If they want to do it, that's fine. But as me, I didn't have time for it. He definitely didn't have time for it. So this full service solution was the only way to go. So a lot of other programs require a lot of your time. I didn't have that. I don't have that. Like, what to say if a coach reaches out to, I don't know. What am I? What are you texting me for? And the number of times, like how many times he actually interacted with you or your team, and you all got back to him, the portal, having the scripts, and so even though you had the portal, you had, hey, Coltrane, you would say, these are the things that you should say if they come up with the questions. Those are, kind of like the common responses. So even though you had those, you still responded. You're very patient with the process. You're patient with the athletes. And so, they're very excited. And even though, you probably told Coltrane 20 times, you still said, hey, Coltrane, this is how we respond, right? So whether you're looking at your sheet or whether you're thinking from it off the fly, you responded to him. And in those moments, he was able to get back to the people that he needed to get back to.
Absolutely. I really appreciate it. Me and Coltrane had a lot of conversations.
Oh my gosh. So for me, it was the other organizations were requiring too much time. We wouldn't have had him, he wouldn't have got the level of outreach that was done. Wouldn't have been done. It wouldn't have been the same. So definitely not.
One last question for you. I think I kind of know the answer already, but if another parent is in a unique situation or on a tight timeline or in really any situation, and they know that they need to market their athlete to get recruited, but they don't necessarily have the time to do it or the know-how to do it, what would you tell them about working with Apex, and would you recommend us if it came up? And
I would definitely recommend it. You'll get your team and your organization will get it done. You'll get it done.
Yes, ma'am. I really appreciate that.
Hands down, you'll get it done. I mean, yeah, we needed all of the help. We didn't know the contacts. And it's also very helpful that, for football, you not only bring in that knowledge, right? But you also work with athletes across the spectrum. You're not just like specializing. So I don't know, you maybe do a couple turn your head around like Chucky or whatever, and then you can speak on soccer. Your team has that knowledge to be able to service all of the athletes. And so I think it's very, very important. So those systems that you have in place, you've created repeatable systems that have, so that you can now do measures, key performance indicators and metrics and all of that type of stuff. Once you have those automated systems in place, this is something that you can do again and again and again. So it becomes proven. So yeah, it's it's a lot of work to, like, film editing is a lot of work. Putting together a bunch of reels on IG is a lot of work to me. Okay.
To
showcase an athlete and to put the little highlight circles in, and that's a lot. It's a lot of work. It takes a lot of time. I just don't have that time, and I don't have that expertise to be able to do that.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Well, I really appreciate it, Marcia, and that's all I have for you. I really appreciate you hopping on this call. Is there anything else you want to say before we jump off here?
Apex, college recruiting is definitely the organization to help with all your recruiting needs. If you have an athlete that needs to get known and be recruited, this is the organization for it.
And there you have it. That is how the process unfolded for Marcia and her son, Coltrane. It was exciting. We were glad to have them on board. And if you want to know how you can get the same level of service, the highest level of exclusive, hands-on, one-on-one personal service for you and your athlete, I'm going to leave the link down in the description, and there'll be a short video on the next page with more information.